Don't be too afraid to render service to a greedy buyer or to a greedy employer. It makes no difference to whom you render this service. If you render it in good faith and in good spirit and keep on doing it as a matter of habit, it's just as impossible for you not to be compensated as it is to be and not to be at the same time. Well, that law of increasing returns. Now, just remember that when you start applying this principle, that you don't have to be too careful about the person whom you render it. As a matter of fact, what you should really do is to apply this principle with everybody you come into contact, no matter who it is. Strangers and acquaintances and business associates and relatives alike. Make it your business to render useful service wherever you touch human relations in any shape, form, or fashion. Because the only way that you can increase the space that you occupy in the world, and by the space that you occupy, I don't mean necessarily the physical space, but the mental and spiritual space as well, will be determined by the quality and the quantity of the service that you render. The quality and the quantity plus the mental attitude in which you render it. Now, those are the determining factors as to how far you'll go in life, how much you'll get out of life, how much you'll enjoy life, and how much peace of mind you'll have. And next, it brings one to the favorable attention of those who can and often do provide opportunities for self-promotion. The favorable attention of people. You'll go into any organization, and if you're alert-minded and take notice, you'll find out who the people are that are going the extra mile. You'll find out very quickly. And also, if you watch the procedure and the records of those people who are going the extra mile, you'll find that when there are promotions around, they're the ones that get the promotions. They don't have to ask for them. It's not necessary at all. Because the employers are just naturally looking around for people who will go the extra mile. And next, it tends to permit one to become indispensable in many different human relationships, and therefore enables one to command more than the average compensation. But I'll tell you one thing that's not in my notes that it does, and I want you to know this. It does something to your soul inside of you. It makes you feel better. And if it didn't do if there's not another reason in the world why you should go the extra mile, I'd say that would be adequate. You know, there are a lot of things in life that cause us to have negative feelings, cause us unpleasant experiences and feelings, a lot of things in life. This is one thing that you can do for yourself that will always give you a pleasant feeling. And if you go back in your own experiences, I'm sure that you'll remember that you never did a kind thing for anybody that you didn't get a great deal of joy of it. Maybe the other fellow didn't appreciate it. That's unimportant. It's just like love. To have loved alone is a great privilege. And it doesn't make any difference whatsoever whether your love is returned by the other person. You've had the benefit by the emotion of love itself. And so it is by the principle of going the extra mile. It'll do something to you. It'll give you greater courage. It'll enable you to overcome inhibitions and inferiority complexes that you've been storing up back down through the years. Just this stepping out and making yourself useful to somebody. And don't be too surprised when you do something courteous or useful for somebody who's not expecting it, and they look at you in a quizzical sort of way, as much as to say, well, I just wonder why you're doing that. Some people will be a little bit surprised when you go out of your way to be useful to them. Also, it leads to mental growth and physical perfection in various forms of service, thereby developing greater ability and skill in one's chosen vocations. You know, delivering a lecture, or making up your notebook, or filling your job, whatever it is that you do in life that you're going to repeat, make up your mind that every time you do it, you will excel all previous efforts on your part. In other words, you're a constant challenge to yourself. And you'll find how quickly and how rapidly you will grow if you'll go at it in that way. I have never delivered a lecture in my life that I didn't intend to deliver better than I did previously. I don't always do it, but that's my intention. And it makes no difference what kind of an audience I have, whether I have a big class or a small class. I don't often have small classes, but sometimes I have had small classes. But I put just as much into a small class as a big one. Not alone because I want to be useful to my students, but because I want to grow and I want to develop. And out of effort, out of struggle, out of use of your faculties comes growth. And then It enables one to profit by the law of contrast. Had you ever thought about that? And I'll tell you right now, you won't have to advertise that one very much, because it'll advertise itself. Because the majority of people around you are not going to be going the extra mile, and that's all to the good for you. Now, if everybody went the extra mile, this would be a grand world to live in, but you couldn't cash in on this principle as definitely as you can now, because you'd have a tremendous amount of competition. But don't worry, you're not going to have it. I can assure you you're not. Practically be in the class by yourself. Now, there will be some cases, perhaps, where people with whom you're working or with whom you're associated will be shown up for not going the first mile, let alone the second one, and they won't like it. Now, of course, you're going to cry about that one and quit and go back to your old habits, just because the other fellow doesn't like what you're doing. Or are you? Of course not. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, it's your individual responsibility in this world to succeed. That's your sole responsibility. And you can't afford to let anybody's ideas or idiosyncrasies or notions get in the way of your success. You can't afford to do that. You should be fair, you should be just with other people, but beyond that, you're under no obligations to let anybody's opinion or idea stop you from going out and being successful. I'd like to see the person that could stop me from being successful. I'd just love to take a look at him, see what he looked like. And I want you to feel that way about it, too. I want you to make up your mind that you're going to put into these laws into operation, and that you're not going to let anybody stop you from doing it. Also, it leads to the development of a positive, pleasing mental attitude, which is among the more important traits of a pleasing personality. Not among the more important, it is the most important one. As a matter of fact, it's the first trait of a pleasing personality, as you will see when you get to that lesson. A positive mental attitude. Isn't it a marvelous thing to know what you can do to change the chemistry of your brain so that you're positive instead of negative? Isn't it a wonderful thing to know that you can do that so easily? How? Why, by getting in that frame of mind where you want to do something useful to the other fellow without rendering service with one hand and picking his pocket with the other while you're doing it. Doing it just because of the goodness that you get out of doing it, knowing that eventually, if you render more service and better service than you're paid to render, sooner or later you will be paid for more than you do, and paid willingly. That's the way the law works. That's the law of compensation. And that's an eternal law. It never forgets. It has a perfectly marvelous bookkeeping system. And you may be sure that when you're giving out the right kind of service and the right kind of a mental attitude, that you're piling up credits for you somewhere that will come back to you multiplied sooner or later. Also, it tends to develop a keen, alert imagination, because it is a habit which keeps one continuously seeking new and more efficient ways of rendering useful service. Now, that's an important thing, isn't it? It develops your imagination, because you begin to look around to see how many places, how many ways and means there are of helping other people to find themselves. And in helping the other fellow to find himself, you find yourself. Incidentally, one of the most outstanding things that I discovered in my research was that when you have a problem or an unpleasant situation and you don't know how to solve it, you've done everything you know, you've tried every source that you know anything about, and you're still at a stalemate, there is always one thing that you can do. And if you'll do that one thing, the chances are that you not only will solve your problem, but you'll learn a great lesson.